The attack on Palestinian women and men in the United States has a long history. Yesterday, Rabab talked about the LA 8, and so we wanted to talk a little bit more about Professor Abdulhadi's case, and similarly, Professor Abdulhadi has a very long history of activism in the Palestinian struggle. And the program that she runs at San Francisco State University is the only one of its kind in the nation. And it is one that brings a lot of Palestinian students over, particularly Palestinian young women, and develops them as community leaders who have started to run different organizations in the Bay Area and who also produce very important work on Palestine. And so again, in a very different way than Razmia, these are very targeted campaigns, and they're also, there's like a hunt. I mean, what Suha described is revenge for testimony and activism 40 years prior. And Dr. Abdulhadi similarly has a very long history of activism. And Ancha, who is, as Jaime said, a two-person show, but there is a particular person who is very well known to some of us, Tammy Ross Benjamin, who is a virulent anti-Arab, anti-Muslim racist. I will not repeat her quotes because there's no reason to give them airtime, but they're outrageous. And the way that she has gone after students, Palestinian students, one of whom was suspended and is not allowed to return to campus at San Francisco State University, and Dr. Abdulhadi and the program is on all fronts. It's to threaten employment, but it's also to go after her, as she spoke about yesterday, on false accusations of support of terrorists, which is a very serious allegation. And if it was up to Tammy Ross Benjamin, Dr. Abdulhadi would also be in prison and under trial. So what we wanted to talk about is the organizing that happened. Dr. Abdulhadi talked a little bit about that yesterday, but she was given very useful legal advice, and that was a very important part. Our legal defense is very important. The activism of civil rights lawyers is very important. But she also described the organizing to try to really push for a change in the campus climate on San Francisco State University, and for that to set a precedence for how administrations and campuses respond all over this country. And so as we were thinking together of how to respond, we were thinking, one, how to protect and defend students, Professor Abdulhadi and Ahmed, and that's an ongoing battle. Also to build and strengthen that program and insist that San Francisco State University stand behind that program and invest even more money in it, so that Backlash has become an opportunity to say, part of why she can do this is because you haven't invested in this program in the way that it is, so she's the sole professor of this program and there's not a whole department behind her. And so that's been some of the work. But there was incredible support because people understood how this threatened all of us. So there was a letter by Jewish activists and intellectuals that 500 people signed, a letter from public intellectuals and academics all over the world that 350 people signed. There was a letter by Black intellectuals and activists that 100 people signed, specifically calling out the way that Israel and Zionists have engaged parts of Black Christian leadership to carry out their agenda around Christian Zionism. And there was an article by the strikers at San Francisco State University. It may not be known, but San Francisco State University has a very radical history. There was a strike that secured ethnic studies, and that's a history that keeps getting lifted up, because another thing AMCHA is trying to do is attack ethnic studies as not valid, as a not valid area of study. And in doing that is attacking decades of third world liberation struggles. And so a lot of the fights have been to bring together different groups on campuses and ethnic studies to also strengthen ethnic studies. So we're just offering this by ways of thinking about what are we trying to do when we're fighting backlash, and how does it become an opportunity to strengthen ourselves in addition to defending ourselves. Another quick example is we handed out on the back an ad that was put out by over 40 survivors of the Nazi genocide and 300 descendants of the Nazi genocide. And once again, different tactics and strategies, but the response is a total dehumanization of people who disagree with the state of Israel. So if you look at the next slide, the response that Jewish survivors in their 80s and 90s have gotten, this is 5 of about, I don't know, like 120 responses. And it's to claim you're not Jewish. If you are Jewish, you're a traitor. I mean, I didn't even put some up that were saying that you should have died. Hitler should have killed you. You should have died. The level at which, and it's to totally obliterate the validity or the existence even of opposition. And so this is a current battle that is ongoing. But it just shows that there are different ways that different of us are attacked, certainly. And at the center of that is Palestinians in Palestine and Palestinians here and other Arabs and Muslims. But anyone, as we all know, who criticizes Israel faces a wrath and a dehumanization. And then this is another example of that. But what's been incredible is ultimately what it's exposed is they can't argue with the content. And so all they do is fight, and of course they're also trying legally. They went after the New York Times, and then they tried to go after us and say these names were false and want us to have to document all 340 people exist and blah, blah, blah. But so they're using their usual tactics, but ultimately it just shows their weakness. And so this continues, and the more they attack, the more that these survivors who wrote this letter and signed it are like, I'm sorry, are you saying I don't have a right to interpret my own experience? And so, again, it's just a very different way of fighting backlash and strengthening ourselves. So the last example is going to be Max Geller, who is going to talk about his experience at Northeastern.